Queensland and welcome to Maryborough. How are you, gang? How good are these people? We're on the Fraser Coast. This is a spectacular place to be. We've had a wonderful weekend. We've been able to travel up and down the road, lots of things, of course, to be able to go to Fraser Island. It's been fun to see that. But there's plenty of amazing historical stuff that is here. Honestly, we've been so blessed to be able to go the whole way around the country, but it is a real pleasure to be here because there is a story around every corner. I'll explain the Mary Poppins of it all in a moment. The architecture alone is awesome. The people are just fabulous. So thank you so much for having us, and a couple of big surprises before we are done tonight. As always, we want to thank Harvey Norman for making all of this possible, and the Services and Citizens Club here in Maryborough as well for putting us up here tonight. Okay, let's have a chat about the news that is around today. And for the first time in the program's history, I just want to say the Prime Minister's awesome. Only because that'll turn up on their media monitor service. So now they can pay attention to the rest of what I'm about to say. As you know, last week the Prime Minister stood up on Vietnam Veterans Day, claiming, of course, that how we treat our veterans is desperately important, and the mistakes historically that have been made about when they returned was a terrible scourge upon us all. Then, of course, we saw the real situation of how this government values veterans through the Veterans Affairs Minister, Matt Keogh, and the Prime Minister. Now, for those that are just catching up to this, for some reason, despite the fact that we now have a $4 trillion debt, despite the fact that the federal government in this next financial year will spend tens of billions of dollars more than it gets in, apparently the big red line in the sand are people who have served this country. Allied health is something that can extend to essentially everything that is not about life and death, and for the men and women who have defended our nation. And as I say, for a day, for a generation, they deserve to be treated better than anyone who has been ever elected to any Australian Parliament in terms of the health and support that they get. Now, allied health in part can extend to things like sessions to deal with the consequences of post-traumatic stress, mental health. Last week, we introduced you to a veteran who had said that if the $5,000 cap was in place, then he would have run out of the number of counselling sessions that he would have been able to have, and he was in a life and death struggle with what was going on inside him as a result of the trauma that had happened with serving the country. I mention all of this again at the start of a brand new week amongst friends here in Queensland because we have a test in front of us. The test in front of us is to keep paying attention. While yes, there are fundamental breaks between the left and the right in Australia, as you've all heard me say for a long time now, I think one of the biggest gaps in Australia is between those who pay attention, like the good people in this room, you at home, and those who don't. Because the government relies on more people not paying attention. So little sleights of hand, little lies, little half-truths are never picked up. Now, this story we first spoke about when it was in the budget, but of course it didn't stand out from the budget, which meant it wasn't discussed as widely as it should. It literally took a dozen people to go to Canberra to first be ignored by the government, to then meet with the government, to then be told computer says no by the government, for this to again bubble back up. Well, the reality is that the Prime Minister, by pigheadedly refusing to change the decision of his government, and a minister who clearly didn't make this decision because he can't defend the decision as if it was one that he had made, well, they are on the wrong side of a very significant coalition of Australians. It's not just the people in this room, the people watching the show, or me. You know that it is politicians across the spectrum. The opposition has been incredibly strong on this. Michael McCormack, as the Shadow Veterans Affairs Minister, has done a spectacular job during his time in question time in the past week. One Nation is talking about it. But the way this government works is that if you are not of their stripe, well, then they will try to ignore all criticism and pretend that all criticism is just from the people who don't like them. Well, last week, of course, Jacqui Lambie, a politician who I deeply disagree with on many things. Yes, I've even called her a crazy cat lady at times. Yet still, she was right to be indignant about this issue. that this is a choice made by people who are making the wrong choice. Even the Teals have voiced their opposition to this position which has taken place right now. But even bigger than that, the Prime Minister, the Minister and the people who made this decision are on the wrong side of people like Legacy. People who, as you know, have been raising money for more than a century now to take care of the families of those who don't come home. As they wrote on their Facebook page, not during the budget, but in the past week, we're asking Minister Keogh to reconsider this approach and work with our sector to co-design a solution, one that protects quality care for veterans and holds providers accountable without putting the burden on those who've served. The Prime Minister, the Minister, the bureaucrats are on the wrong side of the RSL as well. And they deserve a round of applause because they have been the organised voice of veterans for generations and multiple conflicts. Their website is one that, of course, you should go and have a look at, but I specifically want to tell you to go to the part of the website where they want you to share your story. Now, if you are somebody who is a returned service person, again, I don't care if it's a day or it's been generations, please fill out the story. Let's get more case examples, because they're going to ignore the politicians that they think they don't need. They're going to ignore the voters that they think don't matter. We need to remind them that the people who put their lives on the line, regardless of the government they voted for or not, should be taken care of, and have no doubt that there is a limit to the care that can be taken here. The test is for those of us with access to a camera and a microphone to talk about it. The choice is to talk about it, to maintain the focus and to maintain the rage. So a perfect example, to know whether this was going to move outside of the lane that it was in last week, whether it was going to move into further news and make it into the second week. Well, I tuned into Taxpayer Telly this morning. I watched Insiders to see, would somebody mention that this is a potential and burgeoning problem for the government? Duck egg, zero, no one, nothing. Nothing. Not a minute, not a mention. All of these other things were greatly important. No damage whatsoever, not even a flesh wound to the minister, who, remember, the veterans said was contemptible in the way he dealt with them. Which means the people who form what you get to know about the news seem to agree with the government that the soldiers are liars, because that can be the only conclusion. Because if you believe them, you should be outraged at the action of the government, at the action of the minister. And I can promise you this, at News 24, myself and many of our colleagues will continue to talk about it this week. But if you do have a personal story about how that $5,000 cap is desperately important to you, you can always send me an email. You can do that via our website or paul@news24.com.au, because we must keep focused. Another issue that I spent a lot of time talking about is renting. A significant part of my childhood was spent going from rental joint to rental joint, sometimes only a couple of months because the person wanted to sell, only a couple of months longer than that because that was the longest that we could get. And mum and dad, I love them both very much and they love me very much. But I know what it is like to not feel permanency around how you live. And renting is about a third of the country. Increasingly, it is women over the age of 50 who are living by themselves, let alone everyone else who has a right to have a roof over their head. So renting, thank you, love. So renting matters. So, as you know, last week the back and forth was, well, have rents risen at all? Of course, there's nothing to see here. Bullshit, there's plenty to see. And yes, there was headlines about a 30% increase in rent, but then automatically we were told, don't worry about that, that was a miscue, there's nothing to see here. Then, of course, there's Clueless Claire O'Neill, the housing minister, who's trying to say, oh, what's the problem here? I have the tape to prove it, by the way.
We know that the impact of the budget is not going to be significant on rents.
Fair income. Well, today, did you see the special housing envoy? And remember, Luke Gosling, who is Northern Australia envoy, not really a minister, so doesn't have to resign, no matter the allegations currently being dealt with by a court. So they try to pretend these people are ministers until, of course, there's any responsibility, so then we rush the other way. So today there was a special envoy for housing who was doing interviews on television, and if you can work out what the hell he was saying, you're smarter than I am.
How did they come to that conclusion, Treasury? What is that based on? Or was it plucked out of the air?
Look, I don't have the full methodology of the Treasury modelling.
Well, you're the special envoy for housing.
Yeah, of course,
so why don't you know where the $2 per week comes from?
Well, that's a question we can get from the Treasury. It's an answer we can get from the Treasury.
I'm a member of the team who made the decision. I don't understand the decision. I'm a person with specific responsibility to talk about the decision. I have no idea how they made the decision. Because the truth is they don't care about the decision. The only decision they wanted to shove through the parliament was to pretend that the lies they told before the election became law after the election. That they lie to young people that they're suddenly going to be able to buy a home when the reality of the choices that were made in this budget, the main beneficiary is the federal government to just rack in tens of billions more in order to pretend that when they hand $250 back, that somehow they are helping you as you continue to have everything more expensive in your life. And what did we see just this weekend? That there has been almost 80% rises in some people's rent in some parts of the country. Now, some may say, well, hang on, this is the snooty people at the top of the end, who cares? Well, guess what? Everyone living in a house, regardless of where they used to or where they will, deserves the right to be able to live in a home. The rents in some parts of Australia have risen up to 80% in the past 5 years. 8 suburbs in Sydney have seen their rents rise by 60% or more. That's $452 a week. In Melbourne, it's gone up 72%. To give you an idea of what that looks like, again, you're talking $200, $300, $400 in parts of Sydney, $200, $300, and again, $300 in parts of Melbourne. In Brisbane, $200 and $300 again. Same report. Houses have become so unaffordable that many people are turning their attention increasingly towards either buying or renting an inner-city unit, where they will also find competition from international students, and this is the data that was put out earlier today. In terms of Queensland and regional Queensland, there is again a problem here where there are fewer places to rent, which means the amount that you pay for rent, it continues to rise. In this city, rents have gone up by the best part of 10%, according to the data we were checking today, and the availability of homes is starting to slip. Now, it may get boring for many people who don't pay attention for us to continually talk about the same subjects all the time, but this is the difference between paying attention and not paying attention. The government wants us collectively as voters to have ADD, to move on, to be distracted by something else, to look the other way. Well, the reality is that if we continue to do that, we will only make things harder and more difficult for ourselves.
Quick favour. If you are the kind of person who loves Australia and wants to be up to date on what is really going on in our country's politics, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It keeps this channel going. Over 90% of viewers have not subscribed yet, and it would mean the world to us if you did. Thank you. Now, back to the show. Australia has just told the men and women who fought for this country that their mines are worth $5,000 a year. Not a metaphor, an actual cap quietly slipped into a federal budget on the allied healthcare that keeps our veterans alive. Now here's the part that should genuinely stop you in your tracks. This is not a left versus right fight. Michael McCormack opposes it. One Nation opposes it. The Teals oppose it. Jacqui Lambie, a veteran who has buried friends, is furious. Legacy and the RSL, the two organisations that have carried our returned service members for a century, are openly pleading with the government to reverse it. When every colour of the political rainbow agrees on something, it is not policy, it is a moral failure with a $ sign taped to the front. And the government's answer? Veterans Affairs Minister Matt Key has gone full computer says no, standing there like a bloke at a checkout who did not write the rules and will not bend them either. The Prime Minister has been labelled pig-headed for refusing to move, even as the outrage grows louder by the day. Meanwhile, the taxpayer-funded morning shows found time to discuss everything else and nothing about the veterans being told to ration their trauma counselling. Think about what $5,000 actually buys. That's roughly 40 therapy sessions a year at best, and anyone who has sat in that chair knows 40 sessions is nowhere near enough when the demons are winning. A veteran runs out of sessions and a life and death situation becomes a line item in a spreadsheet. That's not healthcare. That's budgeting human suffering. But hold on, because the story does not end there. While veterans are being told to ration their therapy, a second crisis has been quietly strangling ordinary Australians. And this one, you are probably living through it right now. We are talking about rent. 1/3 of Australia rents, and the fastest growing group in that third is women over 50, living alone, watching their rent climb faster than their pension ever will. Sydney has 8 suburbs where rents have jumped more than 60%. Melbourne is up 72%. Some parts of the country have seen 80% rises in 5 years. And the government's response? The Housing Minister looked into the camera and effectively said, no significant impact. Before we keep going, do not forget to like and subscribe. It's how more Australians find this channel, and right now, more Australians need to see this. Then there's the special housing envoy, the person actually paid to fix this mess, who admitted on the record that he had no idea what the Treasury's own rent relief modelling said. You could not make this up if you tried. The government hands out a $250 cheque like a sticking plaster on a broken leg, then sits back wondering why nobody's grateful. Here's the uncomfortable truth tying it all together. The biggest gap in this country is not between left and right, it's between those who pay attention and those who do not. And this government is counting on you to get bored, forget, and scroll on. It's the oldest trick in the book. Flood the zone, hope the electorate develops a case of political amnesia. Do not give them that. The test of a government is not its ideology. It's whether it keeps its promises to the people who served, and whether it protects the dignity of the people fighting to keep a roof over their heads. Right now, this government is failing both. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.